The ancient Mayan calendar's move to a new cycle has prompted doomsday fears among the easily led. The idea the new cycle will lead to the end of the world has attracted thousands of tourists to Mexico and become a standing joke in offices across the world. Associate Professor in Religious Studies, Dawes, joins us tonight to help explain what the Mayan cycle is and why it's become a worldwide phenomenon. Good evening, Greg.
Good evening, Rebecca.
Now, I understand that this particular situation falls within the area of eschatology. Can you tell us what that is?
Yes, the term eschatology comes from Christian theology originally, and it was about the last things. Now, for an individual, traditionally the last things were death, judgment, heaven and hell. You were judged by God and your fate was decided. But also eschatology dealt with what was thought to happen at the end of the world. So Jesus would return, there'd be a period of judgment, and then perhaps a 1,000-year reign of Jesus on earth. So eschatology wasn't just about catastrophe, it was also about a new age in which everything that was wrong with the old world would be put right.
Has Jesus shown up anywhere at this stage?
No.
So how does the subject relate to today's date?
Well, the only connection with today's date is, as you mentioned, the ancient Mayan long count calendar, as it's known. Now, the present cycle of that calendar began on August the 11th, 3114 BC. But the Mayans divided history into roughly 5,000-year cycles. So this cycle is coming to an end either today or, depending on how you match their calendar with ours, on Sunday.
How did the end of world scenario get involved?
Well, that's really interesting because the ancient Mayan documents don't say anything about the end of the world. We really don't know what they thought would happen at the end of this cycle. Most likely they simply thought that a new cycle would begin. But in 1966, a writer called Michael Coe suggested that they might have thought that this would mean the end of the cycle would bring about a kind of catastrophic end of this universe. And this opened the door to all kinds of speculations, many of them associated with astronomical events. This is the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere. It's also a period of increased sunspot activity, so this has led to ideas such as solar flares, flipping the Earth's magnetic field, and so on. And people who follow these theories refuse to see all these things as mere coincidences. They're somehow significantly linked, and that's part of the kind of thinking behind these doomsday scenarios.
Stories of a looming apocalypse are never far from the human narrative. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a really interesting question. We're really only speculating, but they tend to become dominant in a period when people are feeling insecure, when they're facing economic difficulty, political oppression, uncertainty, hardship. It's at these times that we get people, I guess, are tempted to believe that God or some other supernatural being is going to intervene, put everything right, and introduce a new period of history in which things will be as they ought to have been from the beginning.
Do you know of any prophecies that have come true?
No.
Nothing at all?
No, I don't. If you want to be a successful prophet, there are two things you can do. One, you can adopt what I call the Nostradamus approach. You can word your prophecies so vaguely and enigmatically that no matter what happens, it can be seen as a fulfillment. The other thing you find in some of the so-called, or some of the biblical prophecies such as the book of Daniel, is that people have waited until events have occurred, have then written them up in the future tense, and claimed that the book they have just written is in fact very ancient. So it looks like a prophecy, but in fact it's been written after the event. But I know of no real prophecies of this kind that have come to pass.
Well, watch this space. Associate Professor of Religious Studies, Dawes. Thanks very much for your time. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, and a Merry Christmas to you.
See you next year.
Yes.